All right, guys, thank you for joining us tonight, taking the time away from your families and everything to kind of just lean in and grow as a team. Really appreciate that. Wanted to share this week some pretty big aha moment that I had last Wednesday when I got to go to a success event where I heard Gary Vaynerchuk and Tony Robbins. And I always forget the other guy's name, and he's famous. He's from Shark Tank. I think Robert Kirkpatrick or something. Anyway, he's a great storyteller. But I got to hear them and learn and listen. And I wasn't expecting to walk away feeling like I had gone through change. But the next few days, I realized that something clicked up here. And I wanted to share that with you guys. I don't know if you saw a post that I put up on Facebook where I said that I had an aha moment. And part of that aha moment was in the middle of Tony Robbins. He does a lot of jumping around and going like, woo! And you're jumping up and down and you're shouting in each other's face. I mean, it's hilarious because, and I'll explain what was behind that. But one of the things he had us do is he had us lean over to our partners next to us and say, I am freaking amazing. And you're sitting there shouting each other's face, I am freaking amazing, which is really funny because you're like, when you've done as much PD as we have, it's just, okay, well, all right, I'm freaking amazing. But what clicked is that I have done a lot of really awesome things in my life. I've written a book. I've raised some amazing, amazing children. I'm an amazing designer. There's a lot of things that I'm really good at, but all of my life, I've looked at the things that I haven't done right. So instead of saying I published a book, I fell out with my publisher because I had SPD and I was stupid, or I'll never be able to sell any of the designs and the things that I do, and they're just not that great. There's so many people that are way better than I am. I mean, these little underlying, perfectionisms, and I had this realization that all of my life I had this fear of not being enough. And it just hit me that so much of my life I was too busy telling myself that I was not enough. And when I was there shouting, I'm freaking amazing, just something hit me. And I was like, I am. And so God created us with these gifts and these abilities. And if we have perfectionism, it's so easy to look at those areas where we're not perfect, because we can find someone else who's doing it a little bit better than we are, and we tear ourselves down. We're not good enough, because that's the story we tell ourselves. So I want to share with you the points that he gave in his talk, and the things that helped lead me to this realization, probably for the first time in my life, that I have something to offer and it is worth being listened to. Okay? So, yeah, like I just did a landing page for a women's group who's doing an event. And we had the VP of Pepsi Cola, who's a friend of my partner, look at it. And we told him it was a $500 value. He looked at it and he says, oh my gosh, no, this is a $2,000 value. I am freaking amazing. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's that self-talk. Like I'm looking at him like, oh, that's only worth $500. Like how else can that relate in our life? Oh yeah, well, I'm just a stay-at-home mom who blah, 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 blah. Or yeah, I'm homeschooling my kids because of blah, 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 blah. I mean, whatever the story is we tell ourselves, you know what? The reality of it is it's probably not just a $500 deal. It's probably really a $2,000 deal when you start seeing things that way. So here are some of the big oh my gosh, Lindsay's got her cute baby, and you're gonna have to show you. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna unmute you so that everyone, now you have to talk so that your picture pops up.
Oh, hello. You say hi.
Adorable. Oh my gosh. I got to hold a baby. Okay. Back to it. So we just had to show that gorgeous baby. So I'm going to start just from the beginning, and then we're going to ask some questions. You can write down the answers. So the first thing is that he says, and I think we've heard this before, but it's something really good to keep in the back of our mind, is that leaders are readers. And he said 30 minutes a day of PD, and he does a lot of it via Audible. But leaders are readers. He took speed reading courses, and he read a ton of PD. And every successful person we see or we hear from, one of the things they say is they read a ton of personal development. So that I like that statement. Leaders are readers. Self-esteem, this is another one I really loved. Self-esteem comes from pushing yourself to do things that are incredibly hard. What a great statement. Self-esteem comes from pushing yourself to do things that are incredibly hard. How many times have you pushed, when you think about the times you've pushed yourself to do something hard, like get a transformation, or and when you get to the end and you've achieved something, doesn't that boost your self-esteem? So that's, if we're struggling with self-esteem, that's something to keep in the back of our mind. He said, a lot of what he talks about is emotional fitness, and that is what we're going to be talking about today, emotional fitness and how that can affect everything. Okay, so he says, our emotional state, it controls our ability to influence others. I'm sorry, you're hearing Augie. It controls our ability to influence others, our mental and emotional state. And it creates a blueprint and rules for our life. So we have this blueprint that's been created in our brain over years that says, if this happens, this is how you emotionally react. And so as we get older, when something happens and we get depressed or sad, or we feel like we're not enough, or we can't do it, or whatever those things are, those are neurological pathways in our brain that have been created over time, so we automatically go that direction. And I love the book, The Happiness Advantage, I've been listening to, and something my son, he's so funny, he loves little facts, and my 17-year-old son once said, Mom, you know how memories are made. He says, what happens is, it's like, I like to think of it about akin to walking through a forest. When we're creating habits or we're doing new things and we're creating muscle memory, and even in our brain, it's like you're walking through a meadow for the first time. The person, if you walk through the next day, you can kind of see where it was that you walked, maybe if the grass is still bent down. But if you walk there more often, the start becomes a path. Now, if you go there a lot, there is a hardened path, and that's muscle memory. And that's also the blueprint that's created all over our brain, so that when we get, we have an emotion that causes anxiety or overwhelm or sadness or whatever these emotions are that affect the way we act, it's this blueprint that's been created over the years. So we have to learn how to change our state so we can change the blueprint. We have to create new pathways. And in the Happiness Advantage, he talks about this, where he says, if you're naturally a pessimistic person, people used to think that you're born a pessimist or an optimist. And he says, no, you can be a naturally pessimistic person, but start doing the gratitudes every day. Start doing the actions to create those pathways. And over time, you can flip the switch to becoming an optimistic person. And I've actually seen this happening in my family's life. We started writing down gratitudes every day. When I go to bed at night, in my head, I am walking through my day and thanking God for every single thing. Thank you, God, for the cup of coffee this morning that Trent brought to me, or thank you, Lord, for the time that we had. Thank you that I'm able to work out and that I have the ability to work out when so many don't. But getting that and changing the mind and those pathways. So changing our blueprint and changing our state. So one of the things he says, and this is a good one to write down, is emotion is created by motion. Emotion is created by motion. So if we want to change our behavior and our emotions, we have to change our state. We have to start moving. So how can we change someone's focus? We have to start putting ourselves in our peak state. Whatever it is that's going to get us that point where we're doing really well. Our peak state is when we're doing really well. So he says one thing is like pretending to laugh. He says if you pretend to laugh long enough, eventually you're really going to laugh. It's like priming the pump. Just sit there and start laughing at yourself until you start laughing at yourself. He says a way to change your state. But we need to change the focus in our physiology. So one of the questions he asked, and I'll share with you guys my answers so you can get an idea, so write this down. But, you know, the whole point of doing any of this is because we want things to be different. So one of the questions is, what is life on my terms at the next level? What does it look like? So if I was going to take my life to a new level in the next year, what would it look like? And then what would I need to change? So what's preventing us from getting to that next level? And what actions do we need to take to change it? So what does an extraordinary life look like? That's the question. What does an extraordinary life look like? For me, I wrote down financially free, peaceful. I want a housekeeper. I want to be traveling. I want to take pilgrimages. I want to provide experiences for my children. I want to give scholarships to children in need. And I want to fund ministries. So write that question down. You don't have to necessarily answer these right now, but I do want you to write these questions down because I want you to take some quiet time to do that. So what does an extraordinary life look like? Number 2, and this one's really important. What has prevented me in the past from living an extraordinary life? What are the roadblocks that have gotten in the way? For me, I wrote down fear of failure, not getting it right, so perfectionism. I was afraid of not getting it right. Always having the time excuse, so the lack of resources, usually an excuse. And then the third one is, what actions do I need to take to change, to be able to live life at the next level? So for me, I was like, I need to stop making excuses, start with my body, get back my transformation, harness my mind, let go of the fear, and realize it doesn't have to be perfect. So plan and act. And for me, that's a huge one, realizing it doesn't have to be perfect. That has held me back more in my life than anything before. But it's asking ourselves those questions. What does an extraordinary life look like? What has prevented me in the past? And what actions do I need to take to change it? It's like, what are the negative beliefs? I can't do it. It's too overwhelming. I need help. When I haven't been able to push through, what are your negative beliefs? That was mine. I can't do it. It's too overwhelming. For me, it's overwhelming. I can't do it. I need someone to do it with me. And then 3 was acting and making the plan. So for me, I was like, I need to start scheduling my content and failing forward. Letting go of perfectionism and not being afraid to fail. There's 2 skills in life, 2 master skills in life. The first one is the science of achievement. And he talks about there's 3 things to the science of achievement. And I love this other statement. It says, focus shifts emotion to massive action. So the first thing is focus. So it's about having absolute clarity and commitment to our goals, to what we want. He talks about how our brain's going to find what we see as important, so it starts focusing on it. So it's back to when you buy a new Corolla and suddenly all you see on the road is everyone is driving a Corolla, you know? Or if you're focused on the color red and suddenly everybody's got red, or your brain focuses on those things. So when we focus on what we want, and we're clear on what we want, then our brain physiologically will start really focusing on the same thing. That's why having that time in the morning when you're meditating and praying, and you sit there and you think about, visualize yourself reaching your goals, whether you're visualizing yourself wearing a dress that you really want to wear if it's losing weight, whether you're visualizing yourself sitting down having a cup of coffee while you're watching your housekeeper clean your house, which will probably be mine, whatever it is. But in order to get that focus, we have to have a clear vision of where we want to be. And taking the time to really sit down and think through this will help give so much clarity to life. And then The second one is of the forces of creation is massive action. So back to the 10X rule. So effective execution. So we get rewards by effective execution. And, you know, he mentioned modeling someone who gets results. If we're not getting results and we know what we want, then we need to find someone who's done that and model after them. He said that's how he got to be to the point where he has had the president of the United States calling him asking for advice back in the day. You know, it's you are constantly, again, you're the sum of the people that you are around the most, lifting that lid and reaching up and finding those people who have what you want or model what you want, and then modeling after them. And the third one he says is grace. And I love it. He's like, whether he's a Christian, but he's like, it takes focus, massive action, and a lot of grace. And I love that because I think that's where praying, for me and for a lot of people on this team, it's praying. And so one of the things that I've started doing after going to Tony Robbins, and I've done this in the past, but I started doing it again, is getting up at 5 a.m. and working out and taking my prayer time. Now, Trent and I are going to start working on a project. So that's going to change. It's going to be waking up at 5 a.m, praying, working on our project, and then I'll have to work out sometime during the day. But it's the prayer part, the sitting down and starting with the gratitudes and asking God. It says, ask, you shall receive, seek, you shall find, knock, and it shall be opened unto you. So asking that God pour out the blessings upon my marriage, upon my husband, upon my children, upon the business, opening the doors, showing us the next step. But doing that, every day, will help get with that clarity and that focus. The second master lesson, he says, is called the art of fulfillment. He says fulfillment is an art, and we're all fulfilled by different things. And he told the story of this guy who is a famous, really rich billionaire, and I don't remember the name of the person. All I remember is that he said he was at a ski resort, and this friend texted me and said, hey, it's my birthday. And he's like, dude, it's 9 o'clock. I didn't get a chance to text you yet. He says, I'm so excited. I just bought a painting I've wanted for 15 years, and I spent $84 million on it. And Tony Robbins is like, what does this painting look like? That's $84 million. Like, God, I'm going to head over there. I've got to see this painting. It's got to be amazing. And the whole drive over there is like, what will this painting look like? Like, this has got to be such an amazing painting. And he gets over there and he looks at this $84 million painting, and he looks at his friend and he's like, dude, it's a red square. And it really was. He showed the picture and it was a red square. And I'm like, $84 million. But he said, we're all fulfilled by different things. And to one person, it's a red square. And to someone else, it's something different. But really learning and mastering the art of fulfillment. He says, money doesn't solve any problems. It just magnifies who we are. So it's really important that we learn how to be fulfilled and happy in the state we're in right now. And that was a really big one for me too, because it's so easy to keep looking for, trying for the next thing, especially if you're struggling financially or if you're going through something. It's so easy to want the next stage or want the next. But he said, in order to really, truly master the art of fulfillment, we have to learn how to be happy where we are right now. So he says low energy states. So he talks a lot about energy. When we are high energy, we're doing great. When we're low energy, so when we're sad, when we're overwhelmed, when we're like all those negative hard things, he said it's a suffering state. And if happiness ever requires other people to act differently, then we will never be happy in this lifetime. And that was another really good one, because it's so easy to think, well, why does so-and-so have to do this? Or why is this? Or if this were different? But the whole art of fulfillment is that we have to learn how to be happy in this place where we are right now. Happiness is a power. So the happier we are, he says, you can earn money and achieve more and be successful. And if you're reading The Happiness Advantage, it's right in line with what The Happiness Advantage says as well. That when we're happy, We can think more clearly. We have more energy. People connect with us more, and our ability to make more money goes up. So he talks about the sad state, which is the low energy state, being a state of suffering. And then he says our energetic state, where we're happy and things are great, he calls it a beautiful state. And I love the way you put that, like a beautiful state. When we feel happy, we feel good. And I like to think of it personally as a peaceful, trusting state. Because I think that when we look at what we're going through in life, and no matter what kind of suffering might come our way, if we can live in a state where we're trusting and we know that God's got this, that we can live in a beautiful state, because we know that in the end it's going to be okay. So there are 4 steps to living in a beautiful state. The first step is to take some form of massive action. So he says take 10 minutes. You can write this down or take it some time to write why you must live in a beautiful state every day, no matter what. Why living in that beautiful state, or I like to call it state of grace, peace, trust, no matter what. I wrote to be happy and teach my children to be happy, to shine his light and trust that he's got this in word, deed, and emotion. To live in a beautiful state is to have perfect trust unleashed. The second thing is anticipate what will bring out the suffering in us. So the first one is to understand why we want to live in that state. And the second thing is to anticipate what will bring the suffering out in you. And this was a really good exercise. And he wrote the question, what are your favorite flavors of suffering? So you can write that question down. What are my favorite flavors of suffering? Because in order to live in a beautiful state, we have to know what is causing the suffering so that we can then figure out the next step. So for me, I wrote anxiety and overwhelm are definitely my first go-tos. I get anxious and overwhelmed. My peace is gone. I get nutty, and that's one. The second one is that of my favorite flavors of suffering is feeling like I'm not enough and feeling lonely. Feeling very alone. Not enough and feeling alone. And why? Anxiety, when I really look, why is anxiety? Why is that the first thing? And when I really break it down, it's my lack of planning and having too many things on my plate. The biggest one being the lack of planning. Always afraid I'm going to drop a ball, always trying to keep everything in my head because I'm not planning. So figure out whatever your favorite flavors of suffering are and ask yourself, so if it's anxiety, why? What triggers the anxiety? So you're getting down to the scientific, your problem, your troubleshooting. And the second thing, like with sadness and not enough, I realized it can be triggered through scrolling. It can be triggered through seeing other people connect and feeling left out. It can be through seeing what I'm not, maybe seeing someone else doing something they're excelling at and me feeling like I'm not enough because I'm not good at it. You know, so it's a lot of it for me comes from some form of activity that can bring on comparison. And the next question is, what can we do to break the pattern? So again, you're looking at, so you've broken it down. Why am I suffering? What are my biggest struggles? This is what it is. This is why it is. And then the next one is, what can we do to break the pattern? So for me, with anxiety, I can plan and schedule my week, start keeping lists, and with the not feeling like I'm enough, or the sadness or the loneliness, giving myself affirmations, telling myself I'm freaking amazing, not scrolling social media. And if I find myself doing that, to stop and to get my personal development in every day, no matter what. Those are huge. So that's again, this is troubleshooting. So I love this. What I love about Tony Robbins the most is he hacks the brain. He hacks the brain and the emotions. And I love troubleshooting. And so we look at this And we're able to look at the suffering state and say, oh, these are the things that are causing the most, and this is why it's doing it, and this is what I can do to prevent it. I mean, when we hack it that way, it helps us to see everything kind of clearly, especially when we lay it out on paper. The third thing is what he calls the 90-second rule. And he talks about how it takes 90 seconds where we start feeling that emotion, that negative or that suffering emotion. And we have this, within 90 seconds of starting to feel it, we can make a decision of what we're going to do to stop going down that pathway. Like stop it like that. So if you've read in PD where they talk about, oh, as soon as you find yourself thinking about something, switch your thought or do something different. He talks about like what are your two most stressful thoughts? So that's another question I want to write down. What are my two most stressful thoughts? So when I'm going throughout my day and I have a thought come in to my mind and it starts stressing me out, what are the two most stressful thoughts? I couldn't think of two, but I wrote down 4. I can't do it. I don't know how. It's too much. It's overwhelming. I'll be asked to do something. Like I just created a video for a company that's a company that's got an online real estate forum that they've created. And I did a marketing video for them. My first reaction was, oh, I can't do it. I don't know what to do. It's too much. Like all these thoughts going through my head, which has been since the time I was in 8th grade. When I was 8 years old, my mother told me to write a book report, same thoughts. And I'm on the floor throwing a tantrum. And then I wrote an A paper and I made a kick butt video, but not until after I threw the tantrum. So it's learning. For me, it's going to be learning how, as soon as I get that I can't do it thought, to stop within 90 seconds and focus on something you can appreciate and be grateful for. So as soon as you recognize those thoughts, immediately focus on something you can appreciate or be grateful for. Again, it's turning to gratitude. I love this. I mean, gratitude just seems to be the theme of the year, theme of a lifetime. But immediately turning to gratitude and as soon as those thoughts start to hit. So what's happening is that your body is starting to create, it's like a thought comes in your head, your body says, you ever seen that cartoon with all the people in the brain who trigger everything? So the thought comes in your head and they're like, oh, trigger anxiety. And immediately you're like, oh, no. You know, it's like we have to be able to but no, we're not going to do that. And focus on what we can appreciate, be grateful for. And he says, we have to wake up and put the brain to bed. Because when the brain takes over, put the brain to bed. We just need to train ourselves to get out of the pain. As soon as we start feeling that pain, I don't recognize my notes there, but as soon as we start feeling that pain, that's when we have to start to feel that emotion start to well up. We've got to get rid of it then. Because as soon as he told the story of Robin Williams, who he had worked with on several occasions, and he had tears in his eyes talking about Robin Williams. He says, I had never lost a client until Robin Williams. He says he had so many things he'd achieved in life, so many wonderful things. He said, but what it takes is when we don't stop it at the root, it builds and builds and builds. So that's why we have to get used to stopping that right then and there. So again, we've got the first one. I'm going to get number 4 in a second. To living in a beautiful state, to staying in a beautiful state. Number 1 was decide to take some form of massive action. So what does it look like for us to live in a beautiful state? And what do we need to do to start headed that direction? Number 2 is anticipate what will bring out the suffering in us. So to be able to recognize those emotions and those flavors of suffering that are going to get at us. And then, and what do we need to do to break the pattern? So to be able to recognize it, to understand what causes it, and know what we have to do to break the pattern. The 3 was a 90-second rule. So within 90 seconds of feeling that emotion rise, whatever those trigger thoughts are, we need to nip it in the bud and turn to gratitude. Immediately focus on something we can appreciate or be grateful for. And then number 4 is, I love this one, trade your expectations for appreciation, and your whole life will change in that moment. So change your expectations for appreciation, and your whole life will change in the moment. I'll never forget, Trent will often say this little quote or whatever. It says, there were two men in I think in a prison walls. One saw, like staring out a prison window, one saw bars and one saw stars. So instead of trade expectations for appreciation, in your whole life will change in that moment. So it can be something as simple as having the expectation that we're going to be making more money by the end of the year, and waiting for that to happen. And instead of seeing that, being appreciative of what we have right now, or expecting my husband to act a certain way and being irritated when he doesn't, or being grateful for everything that he does and focusing on seeing that. So change our expectations for appreciation. So he says 3 things cause suffering: loss, less, and never. So losing something, having less of something, and never having something. I didn't take very good notes on that one, but I think that statement says it all. To trade our expectations for appreciation, a whole life changes in that moment. And really, all of this stuff, the big thing that it did for me, again, is it helped me kind of hack. I'm a very emotional person. I've got sensory processing disorder. I feel things to the extreme. And so when I was able to look at and see how he hacked the brain and the emotions and figure out how we can sit there and say, wait, step aside. What's happening here? Why is it happening here? What can I do to prevent it? Because I don't know about you, but we have, like, when Tracy Morrow, when Doug Fitzgerald, when we were at Summit, we ran into Doug Fitzgerald and Tracy Morrow. We were talking, and I pre-ordered his book, One Life, One Shot. And it's not coming out till September, but there's something about that name, One Life, One Shot, that just really struck me. And that's the fact that we have this one life, and we can live it filled with anxiety and expectation, or we can hack those emotions, figure out what we can do to change our state so we can live in a beautiful, fulfilled, and happy state, and live in a state of gratitude and appreciation. So when I was sitting there shouting, I am freaking amazing, after doing a lot of these exercises, it was freeing to sit there and think, I'm telling myself that I'm not enough. And that's not okay. So we change that, and we start to see things open up. And I hope that for you guys, like whatever it is in your life, wherever you're struggling, just to when you answer these questions, pray for clarity. Sit down and during your prayer time and ask God to open up, the Holy Spirit to show you the areas and ways that you can change and change that trigger. Because I do believe it will be absolutely life-changing. So, do you guys have any questions? Anything you'd like to add? You trying to unmute, Jennifer? Want me to unmute you? I got you. Hold on. Maybe we're both unmuting. Oh, you're not unmuting. Did you unmute yourself? Oh, there you go. There you go.
So weird. So there's another book too called, I think it's The Power of Habit, that I read a long time ago. I think it was one of my first PD books. And it can be pretty clinical, but if you get beyond that part, it's a lot of this. And it's so good, and it's such a good reminder, because you can change those pathways. It is possible. It just takes work. And it just reminded me of that. The happiness advantage is very much along those lines, and all of this is all tied together. And it's really cool, the studies that have been done, showing that, you can change that.
And I love how a lot of it's connected to gratitude.
Yes.
Which is really connected to our spiritual journey and our life journey and appreciating I think when we start being grateful for what we have, everything gets better because our kids feel more appreciated, our spouses feel more appreciated, our friends, our families,
Mm-hmm.
So,
I have this, I don't know if you can see it. It's a little gratitude journal.
love
that
it.
I found. It's little. It's so cute. And in it, it has the date. It says, I'm grateful for, and it has 3 things. You can list 3 things, write a paragraph if you want. And then on the back, it's the good deeds / random acts of kindness that you are going to do or have done for that day. And I've had it for a while, and I write in it for a while, and then I get out of the habit, and then I come back to it, get out of the habit. Well, my daughter found it today, and she was reading through it. And she's like, Mom, these are so great. And I said, oh, I'm glad you like it. And she's like, I really like that every day you write that you want to smile more. And she's like, and you do smile, and you smile a lot. Just the things that she noticed from reading that. It was just kind of cool.
I think it's amazing. And I think that, a lot of times I forget to write it down, but when I go to bed at night, and I found myself now, if I wake up in the middle of the night, I start doing it too, but just go walking through my day and thank you, Lord. And one of, when you've got kids and you've got, all this stuff that, a shoe can drop at any time. That's, it's spending that time being grateful and then praying over, so starting with that gratitude and then praying over my children and praying over my family and praying protection and praying for happiness and holiness and all that stuff. But I love that. I need to start writing it down again. We have these little family journals we do. Some nights we forget to do them, but I need to start really journaling the gratitude because I think it's life-changing. So.
I think that's a great idea to do a family journal. Like each person have their...
Trent bought all those, the little composition notebooks. He bought one for everybody in different colors or designs, and we keep them in a drawer in the dining room. And so when we say family prayers, we pull them out with a bunch of pens, and everybody writes 3 things they're grateful for. And Augie draws a picture in his.
Oh, that's a great idea. I love that.
That was all Trent. He's the one who, it's taken years though, I'm telling you. It's only been the last year that Trent got to really leading us every single day in prayer. And I'm grateful. It took a lot of years of praying to get to that point, but it's really awesome.
And I was going to say, I know for me, my sister kind of brought this up because I'm struggling right now with my 4-year-old and tantrums and just feeling the overwhelm. I feel like I'm always yelling at him, and then it breaks me down at the end of the day because you're like, boy, I feel like I haven't said anything positive throughout the day. And it was one of those things that I really try hard now at the end of the night. Like if we're going to bed, it's, you know what, you might not have listened great today, but you did this amazing, or this was really good that you did. Just because I don't want him to go to bed thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't do something, because I know how I feel when I go to bed feeling like that. So trying to really do that more, especially before we go to bed, or if I forget and he's still in his room, it's like, you know what, Michael, hey, listen, you know what, I know we had a rough day or a rough start, but this is what, thank you so much for cleaning up all your toys, because he's still a kid, so you can't expect him to do all this, but it's one of those little things that we're just trying to implement to start. So it keeps us in check.
It does. And raising boys and children in general that are high energy is not easy. You know what I mean? It takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of sometimes tears on mom's part, but I've seen it with my son who screamed and threw tantrums every day until he was 8.5 years old. Something triggered and began to change. But now I see him at 17, pushing himself because of this thing. So you're doing great things. I love that too, like with the kids, like looking at the gratitudes and in specific with each child and specifically saying that out loud. That's a really great, I love that, saying it out loud. I need to do that more often. So awesome. Good. Well, I'm going to quit recording. So guys, thank you for hopping on the call, and we'll see you next week.